put the world on the path to achieving the 1.5-degree scenario. However, the investments urgently required to achieve such scale-up face obstacles due to risks, both existing and new. These risks vary depending on the context. For example, our Africa market analysis, published earlier this year, shows that in many emerging markets in the sub-Saharan Africa, risks related to policy, regulation, contract enforcement, currency exchange, and grid and transmission continue to hinder the development of new projects. In other parts of the world where renewable energy sector is more developed, we are witnessing supply chain disruptions and increasing cost of financing, labor, materials, and equipment. The focus of renewable energy policy on driving prices down has led to the concentration of supply chains in a small number of countries. Trade issues and COVID-related measures have disrupted the supply of key components and equipment from those countries to the rest of the world, demonstrating the vulnerability of this model and the value of localization. Moreover, grid integration and permitting still constitute barriers for investments in new projects, and in many countries, especially those with high levels of variable renewable energy in their energy mix. These developments call for immediate policy interventions and innovative policy design. Policies need to be designed in a way to meet the objective of climate, energy security and access, as well as the development of local renewable energy industries to ensure energy security and other socio-economic benefits. Tailoring international support to address investment flows in higher risk environments is crucial to ensure inclusive energy transition and avoid the concentration of financing in specific regions and countries. In this session, we would like to hear from you on the most challenging risks to renewable energy investments in the power sector in your countries, and we'd like to exchange on how these risks can be addressed. I would now like to invite Rabia Faruqi, Director of KPFC, to deliver a presentation on IRENA's latest analysis of investment trends and enabling frameworks and policy design to address challenges faced in the context where attracting investment remains difficult and challenging. Rabia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So climate imperatives and the recent geopolitical developments we've seen with energy security concerns have amplified the need to speed up the energy transition. I'd like to point out the fact that the energy security issue, access to energy affordability and reliability have been major concerns in most part of the world for decades. So it's daily life for many in this world. So, and still renewable energy investment and the resulting socioeconomic benefits remain concentrated in just a few countries. So the session today is to discuss the enabling framework to boost investment in what is real or perceived higher risk environments, including the need for public investments. I'm going to give you a bunch of numbers so to see how investment has been, the trends of investment have been developing. The upcoming global finance landscape that IRENA produces every 2 years with CPI shows that renewable energy investment have grown considerably in the past 8 years or so. And between 2013 and 2020, we have investment growth rate of 5%. At the same time, technology costs have declined rapidly. So actually, the investment is growing even more than the 5%. Interestingly enough, in 2021, investment jumped by 20% compared to 2020, and that was mostly because it was in anticipation of the expiry of policies in many countries that incentivized renewables deployment. But as you can see in the figure, around 80% of investment, first of all, remained focused in two technologies, PV and onshore wind, which have become increasingly, obviously, cost competitive and mature, owing both to technology development, but also to strong policy support. Investments in technologies that are associated with higher risks are still not picking up, although some will play a really important role in the energy transition, in particular for decarbonizing end uses. So for example, geothermal is still associated with high exploration risk, and bioenergy faces chain risk among others. And in IRENA's 1.5 scenario, bioenergy accounts actually for 18% of total energy consumption. So trying to address those risks will be very important through enabling policies. IRENA actually launched a report on policies for the sustainable use of bioenergy, and thank you for mentioning it this morning. You can find it on our website. Now, renewable energy investments are not only concentrated in technologies, but they're concentrated in terms of regions and countries. So East Asia and Pacific continue to attract the largest share of global investments, receiving more than half of the total in 2021. And within that, China accounts for 81%. Vietnam has experienced some growth, and in 2020, it overtook Japan as the region's second destination for capital. And again, this was driven mainly by the feed-in tariff, which was expiring. So again, the connection to policies. Europe and North America together received over 30% of investment in 2021, and that was led by 4 countries, namely US, Japan, Germany, UK, and Spain. So what this means is that over 70% of the world population, mostly residing in developing and emerging countries, received only 20% of global investment. And in fact, the share of finance going to developing countries has been declining. So, and within these countries, the developing countries, most of the investment is concentrated in a handful of countries, led by India and Brazil. So what is even more concerning is that this trend may just continue because we have estimated, quantified, for example, power targets set for 2030 in our latest report on renewable energy targets that was presented yesterday at a side event. And the results show that the bulk of targeted capacity is in the same countries that are receiving investments today, which, you know, for perceived or real reasons represent the lower risk context. So if you look at those targets that we have estimated, the G20 accounts for almost 90% of the global aggregated targeted capacity. In terms of regions, Asia accounts for almost half of the targeted capacity, and majority, or close to 90%, is in China, India, and Japan. Europe and America account for 40% of targeted capacity by 2030, and the rest of the world, basically, you know, unless enabling conditions are there or ambition is increased, the potential might remain untapped. So if you look at the MENA region, 3% of targeted capacity by 2030, even though the region has huge potential. And then Sub-Saharan Africa accounts for 2.6% of the total, although renewables are obviously fundamental to achieving SDG 7 on the continent that hosts 77% of the world population without electricity access. So our IRENA's Africa Regional Market Analysis that was published early this year shows that despite the enormous potential and needs, Africa accounts only for 2% of global investments made between 2000 and 2020. A third of that focuses in North Africa. So if we look at sub-Saharan Africa, it's 1.4% of global investment in this period, and mostly in South Africa. So what is alarming is that looking at absolute amounts, investment in sub-Saharan Africa went down considerably in 2001, and it's about 1/4 of what it was even in 2002. It went down from 4 billion to 1 billion. And this is despite the fact that the pandemic, that the world emerged from the pandemic, recognizing the critical role energy plays in healthcare, sanitation, telecommunication, resilient livelihoods like we just had in the former session. So these disparities have become evident at the country level, and as these investments are concentrated, as I mentioned, in only a handful of countries. So again, on Africa, 3/4 of investments committed in Africa in the decade 2010 to 20 went to 4 countries: South Africa, Morocco, Egypt, and Kenya. Okay, they might offer risk-return profiles owed to their policy frameworks and their institutional setup that are attractive, but and other regions may not have such an attractive enabling environment, but obviously there is something that needs to be done there, and there is a price tag to creating that enabling framework. So a just and equitable energy transition will mean basically mobilizing funds to those underinvested countries that need it the most. And this will require a comprehensive approach across policy, financing, and technology. So all these elements really can be combined in the design of structured procurement mechanisms, such as feed-in tariffs and auctions. There are known examples, such as the GetFit program that was rolled out in Uganda, the Scaling Solar program, which was introduced in Zambia, Ethiopia, Senegal, and is being rolled out in many African countries right now. And the program provides risk mitigation and credit enhancement products, and was able to attract bidders, lower risks, and transaction costs. In the way that auctions are designed, the risks and transactional costs are minimized on the bidders and assigned basically to other stakeholders, and that includes governments, MDBs, or DFIs, and can attract developers and result in lower prices. IRENA has supported developers secure financing through matchmaking at project level to reduce the challenges they faced in reaching projects' commercial feasibility and build a robust pipeline of investors-ready and scalable projects. The flagship initiatives, as you know, include the Climate Investment Platform in partnership with UNDP and SE4All, and the Energy Transition Accelerator in partnership with the UAE and ADFT. So IRENA also supports countries with tailored technical assistance with open solar contracts, for example, and auction design. As you know, IRENA has been at the forefront of the analysis and supporting countries in the design of auctions since actually 2013, and has become the go-to-go organization for support in the design. And we have looked not only at the design of auction, but also have had several reports looking at the resulting prices, at other policy objectives, such as socioeconomic development, promotion of local industry, and system integration. And this actually complements our work, which we presented at the PSC and a bit yesterday on the structure of the power sector, which really aims to address risks for merchant plants when VRE shares are significant both in liberalized and non-liberalized contexts, and where auctions can really serve as the main procurement mechanism of renewables to protect generators from price and offtake risk. And the latest edition on auctions, which will release in spring, we're analyzing these risks and presenting options to design those auctions in a way that will assign each risk to the party that is most capable of handling it. And one of the important risks that we're looking at relates to supply chains. So the focus of auctions on driving prices down over the past 10 years has led to the concentration of supply chains in a small number of countries. So trade issues and COVID-related measures have disrupted the supply of key components and equipment to the rest of the world, and which really demonstrated the vulnerability of this model and the value of localizing some of the segments of the value chain. So it's becoming more and more evident that auctions should not always focus on price reduction, but should also be designed to achieve other policy objectives. And IRENA, as you know, has been analyzing renewable energy value chains for many years, breaking down each segment into activities and sub-activities to inform policymakers on the skills, materials, equipment that is needed to localize value chain, if not nationally, then at least regionally. Although this discussion is very important in the context of ensuring socioeconomic impact of the energy transition, recent developments have confirmed that value chain, localizing value chain is also crucial for energy security. So to finish, I'll go back to the usual broad policy framework that we showcase here to sort of push for this holistic policy framework, policies to develop local supply chain really need to be part of this broader framework that includes also the flow of public funds to developing countries. I think we cannot understate the importance of public investments in creating an enabling framework for attracting investments, and there are many actors that can influence global renewable energy financing through many different instruments and across different technologies. But we are, maybe just to finish, allow me to mention that we are working right now with many African institutions and countries about how to think about an African position on the energy transition, especially given the recent developments and concern of many countries moving towards fossil fuels. And I think the strongest entry point and this that we can have is the development angle rather than climate one. And the development angle means that just like the US, Germany and other countries are introducing industrial policies to move faster and create value in their countries and their regions for the energy transition. The same holds true for other regions of the world who also want to develop and take the energy transition as an opportunity to bring economic value and social well-being. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director General, and thank you, Ms. Faruqi. I now open the floor for interventions. The floor is open. I give the floor to the Republic of Korea. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Chair. The Korea would like to draw IRENA's attention to the increasing risks of securing critical minerals supply chain for renewable energy transition. In this respect, Korea recently joined Mineral Security Partnership in order to diversify imports through international cooperation, and we are going to establish National Resources Security Control Tower. And we see some signs of fossil fuel backsliding in the world. I would like to stress the importance of solidarity between IRENA member states to keep us from losing the momentum for renewable energy. I would like to conclude by reiterating Korea's commitment to accelerating renewable energy deployment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Zimbabwe. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you for that comprehensive presentation from IRENA, and I'd like to say that statistics don't lie. It is still clear that most of the developing countries are still struggling to get access to financing to ensure that the transition is just and leaves no one behind. I think I'm happy with the view that you are working on the various instruments to look at de-risking the projects, but we believe that our countries, because of lack of access, they might be the fastest way for us to achieve net zero or to decarbonize the sector if they're assisted through long-term patient capital or grants, which will help to move people from poverty. We would like to urge IRENA to continue facilitating the process of how we can find ways of accessing these funds which are available and ways of how we can de-risk the different countries, given that it looks like it's the major issue where the access to financing is limited by that. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Colombia. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I would like to also thank the speaker. For Colombia, developing renewable energies for energy transition and for penetration in the market depend on the growth, the installed capacity, and the technologies that can be applied until scaling up economies, and these are reached faster and with better efficiency in the cost if we have schemes of cooperation and integration and cooperation in the region to have access to a wider market for consumers and producers. The matrix and the process for energy transition need to be taken into account in a holistic way, so the energy sector and transport sector can be taken into account in a more holistic way. In Latin America, now it generates almost 53% through hydropower. In Colombia, it's around 68% comes from big hydro power plants. It has reduced greenhouse gas effects, the emissions, but it has other environmental impacts, and we are vulnerable for climate impacts. Colombia has simpler requirements and more innovative. Now, in the framework of development, we are considering fine-tuning the design of auctions to have a better deployment of the renewable energy sources. To this end, it's important to have a design of auctions that balances the allocation of risk between the different parts. we have to also pay attention to inflation and currency exchange to mobilize investments and increase financing. With the support of IRENA in the risk assessment studies of the countries, we have the support we need. Colombia has worked together with IRENA in collaborations for remap in South America, so as from the existing policies in the country, we can identify options to improve the energy efficiency and to strengthen universal access to energy, to modern energy and through renewable energies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the United Kingdom. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that excellent presentation and fascinating insight into this critical area. It's part of a continuing conversation, and we observed the UN General Assembly Ministerial Meeting on Justice and Inclusive Energy Transitions in Africa, and there we heard from many African leaders on the need for a pipeline of successful projects and the need to de-risk investment in certain contexts. As we've been saying in earlier interventions, I think this is a really critical area for IRENA to look at how it can support its members, to support the kind of renewable energy deployment with the right kind of geographical focus, as Rabia pointed out to us, at the scale needed to achieve policy objectives. And that is, something where IRENA's global membership gives it real strength. We'd agree that technical assistance, including that provided by multilateral development banks, is an important area to help offer concessional finances and get financing and get projects ready to the point of investment. We very much agree with what Rabia set out about the need for reliable and localized supply chains, and in light also agree with the comments made about tying this in with the critical minerals work as well. Obviously, IRENA can help with research and analysis. You're already working very closely with MDBs and IFIs to unlock access to financing. I would add to that, looking hard at whether we can also do more work with the private sector, not least because there's probably more private sector investment funds available these days than public sector ones. Certainly that's the case for the UK. And I know that this is already, there's already been some very strong work on this across Africa by countries like the UAE, using the investment potential of their sovereign wealth funds. So I think we should continue to build on that. We should continue to look for cooperation within multilateral fora to make sure that we have a focused effort on this, and the UK is very happy to facilitate that. We do think that it's really important that both COP27 and COP28 set a global direction on the de-risking that's needed to get renewable energy investment in the power sectors, but in the geographical regions where it's most needed. And we look forward to working closely with IRENA and the upcoming COP presidents to make sure that we continue to raise our ambition. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. I now give the floor to Belgium. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, thank you for the presentation and for raising this very important topic. Creating certainty for renewable energy investors, developers and other stakeholders, and mitigating risks is key for the success of the energy transition. On behalf of Belgium, I would like to share with you some ideas that result from our experience and expertise in supporting energy projects in third countries with high-risk environments. In some cases, we experience barriers or concerns regarding regulatory framework for private foreign investors, financial stability of national utilities, subsidies from local government for off-grid operators, or training for local developers' empowerment. Belgium believes that IRENA has a role to play in that regard, as the agency is already very active in this field and well placed to strengthen its key role to help overcome these barriers. The agency has already built many tools that can be more largely used to address these concerns and support renewable energy deployment at scale. For example, IRENA's Renewable Readiness Assessment helps to identify country-level actions needed to overcome barriers to renewable energy deployment. In addition, we also see other means of support that IRENA could provide to its members. Firstly, the agency could support decision-making on which technology to use to electrify any given area without excluding vulnerable areas and sectors. Furthermore, IRENA could support the social use of energy, like the electrification of public buildings like schools, hospitals, or public administrations. Final suggestion is to provide technical support to identify and promote productive use of renewable energy in the same spirit that is described in the report, Fostering Livelihoods with Decentralized Renewable Energy, by promoting renewable energies as an important component of the green economy, generating income and jobs. To conclude, Belgium would like to highlight the key role that IRENA could play in supporting an inclusive market-based approach that would leverage on the existing market potential of renewable energy solutions, reaching vulnerable populations for whom classical market approaches do not work. The inclusive market-based approach aims to escape from the classical logic of fully grant-based mechanisms, which are difficult to sustain on the long run. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the Philippines. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Philippines is one of the top destinations of investments in Southeast Asia, particularly on renewable energy, and we are gearing towards energy transition, wherein we target to increase the share of renewable energy in the energy mix to 35% by 2030 from the current 22% in 2021, and aspiring it to increase to 50% by 2040. To mitigate investment risk, the government has provided clear strategies, attractive policies, and robust frameworks to reduce risk in investing renewable energy projects. These include the setting up of our targets in the increased share of renewable energy through the updating and publication of the National Renewable Energy Program, the passage of the Renewable Energy Law in 2008, which provides fiscal and non-fiscal incentives to RE developers, the provision of market support mechanisms, including the Green Energy Option Program, the Green Energy Auction Program, wherein we have our first auction last June, which has attracted about 2,000 megawatts of capacities, mainly solar and wind RE projects. Also, the Philippines has the development of the Philippine Offshore Wind Roadmap that was initiated by the World Bank Group in April of this year, which will help the government to implement a comprehensive support to the offshore wind industry, and it is geared towards the reduction of risk and levelized cost of energy. To support the implementation of the roadmap, we have also established the Philippine Offshore Wind Joint Industry Platform, which will bring different stakeholders to identify the opportunities as well as investigate the challenges to boost the development of offshore wind industry in the Philippines. On geothermal, we are currently determining a roadmap for the de-risking of geothermal energy in the Philippines through the initiative of the Asian Development Bank that shall identify, evaluate, and recommend geothermal pre-development stage de-risking strategies that will assist the government in assessing and prioritizing policies and regulations that will increase geothermal development in the Philippines. We would like to commend IRENA on this initiative, and this would be helpful in the various policy support for offshore wind and geothermal energy development being undertaken in the Philippines, and would like to continue our collaboration with IRENA. We also are looking the influx of intents to develop offshore wind and geothermal energy resources in the country following the relaxation of foreign ownership limitation for renewable energy projects. We are currently amending the implementing rules and regulations of our renewable energy law that shall boost investments in the sector by easing foreign ownership limitation from 40% up to 100%, and we are looking at the amended IRR to be issued next month. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Philippines. And I now give the floor to the last speaker, Antigua and Barbuda. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just let me thank the Deputy Director General for her presentation, and also to thank Rabia for highlighting the World Energy Transition Outlook. Of course, there are a number of points that were made which I certainly concur with, but at the same time, a lot is in the World Energy Transition Outlook, and how is it that IRENA as an institution can help developing countries, in particular small island developing countries, in overcoming these risks, and that so they can lead to a just transition. And a number of them are certainly, in my view, outside the remit of the Secretariat, because a number of them are more on the line of political issues which takes place in a different fora. And although I agree that issues that we face, such as policy and fiscal regimes, sector structures, which impedes most of our transition, I'm not sure how IRENA would be able to take these on board. But just let me highlight a couple of things. I do agree that compounding crisis certainly underscores that global energy transition needs to happen and happen fast. But these short-term interventions certainly will ameliorate changes and must be accompanied by some sort of focused energy transition in the medium to long term. One of the challenges I see that given inadequate space and scope for transition, we are having a case where we are looking at a situation that 1.5 is not going to be in sight. So this is something we may need to look at. But one of the things that was not highlighted in the presentation is the whole issue of why are we at this pace. Phasing out fossil fuel is one of the key obstacles. And of course, if we are able to eliminate these market distortion and incentivize energy transaction solution, we would be able to have what we consider just transition and a better outlook. Much of what we see today is a deadlock where the fossil fuel companies continue to subsidize, and which certainly distorts market. You've indicated that prices for renewable is much cheaper, but how is it developing countries like small island states are not getting to this when at only 2% of the market finance that's available out there has gone to small island developing states? And because most of the spending is still being subsidized by the fossil fuel companies. So these are some of the things, while they may not be things that you are able to deal with in this fora as an entity that supports developing countries on a technical level. I just wanted to highlight that. One of a comprehensive set of policies on all technologies also needed to achieve the necessary level of deployment by 2020. And the deployment policies should have more or less some sort of market creation, thus facilitating reduction in technology costs. The scale of which they are deployed is certainly important. An increasing ambition in the plans in the national determined contributions under the Paris Agreement must be firm. This is key to provide a certainty in the direction in which we guide investment. We see many countries are still failing to have increase in their NDCs or new and updated NDCs as it's called for. So these are some of the policies we'd like to see happen. And with that, I'll stop here and I'll thank the Director General and Radi again for a very good world energy transition outlook. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no further comments, I now give the floor to the Director General to address the issues raised and provide overall reflections. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With your permission, I will turn to Mr. Faruqi.
Thank you, Director General. Thank you to all member states for your interventions and for supporting the work that we're doing. We've been doing for so many years now on the enabling framework, as you said, policy, regulation, regulatory framework, trying to not only analyze but see best practices and how to implement them. The capacity building efforts that we've done in many countries, be it on auctions, on targets, and many others, on also trying to ensure that the socioeconomic objectives and development objectives of many countries are taken into consideration when looking at regulation. So I also note the importance that many of you have given to viable and localized supply chains. This is music to our ears as we've been working on this for many, many years. But when at the time industrial policy was not in fashion, it was a bit difficult to convince that, you know, this was one way that we need to, one aspect we need to look at. But I think this is past, and working on this localization, at least at the regional level of supply chain, together with the industrial policies that is necessary for local value creation, is becoming very important. In terms of critical minerals, obviously, I think a lot of people are now worried about securing critical minerals. But I think this, in the same way we're looking at local value chains, we need to also look at critical minerals in terms of the value it brings to the country, and not just in terms of the commodities that it provides to the renewable energy sector in general. I'm just going to finish with the financing. I really understand the intervention by Zimbabwe on long-term patient capital or concessionary finance or grants, which are essential to the development of Africa. As I mentioned, I think the most important entry point to speak about the energy transition for developing countries and in general is the link to development. It's any other aspect is not necessarily very much valuable, even if it's important, it's not valuable in the narrative that we have. And this brings me to the last intervention from Antigua and Barbuda, which, I mean, I think IRENA has cautioned against, you know, the continued investments in fossil fuels. It's in our veto. Our Director General has provided this analysis a while back already. But it brings me to my last comment, which is equity. I think we're at a point in the energy transition where we know that we need to go faster, to scale up much more quickly. But that means also that we need to discuss maybe certain elements or certain issues that are not, as Antigua and Barbuda mentioned, easy to discuss. And that's some of the systemic issues that exist in our current global economic system that is entrenched in a growth model that has seen its limit for quite a while now, and maybe the forthcoming discussions can be about how it is that we can continue to develop within the constraint of our carbon budget, and let many of the economies of the world that haven't had the privilege of the well-being that some of the global north countries have had, try to expand or gain benefits from the energy transition, through the energy transition to greater well-being and economic value. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Farocchi, for your reflections. This concludes our consideration of item 9.